Thanks, Maurizio. Well, this is the final installation of our winter program. And at the beginning of the winter series, I was asked if I could nominate some folks to come up and speak about architecture and experiences in architecture. And I came up with 3 names, and all 3 ended up being accepted. And some of those of you here may remember we had Bruce Coavera come and speak, and that was somebody that I actually was sort of, well, this is a bit of a lie, but kind of teaching with in Rome. That's sort of where I got to know Bruce. And then David Stavros was here, and that's a fellow that I went to school with. And like a good host, I've saved the best for last. We won't tell David and Bruce what I just said, but I've gotten to work with John Christie. I've known John, I think now at least 5 years. We got to know each other in a pursuit for a mental health project in Hamilton, which then followed with a pursuit for the 2 regional mental health projects here in London and St. Thomas. And just a little bit about John, and I'm not going to read too much from the material that was sent because some of it's kind of formulaic, and that's what you get when you look on a website. But what I can say is John is very passionate about the work he does, and it comes through. I've seen, and there are people in the room who have seen John speak about the work that he's doing. He is a leader in healthcare across Canada. I think I'm not making it up when I say he's probably been involved in over 50 health centers, hospitals across Canada. John graduated at Carleton, I think in 76. 1870. That would make sense because I think you know my cousin Robin Craig, Carleton. But John has many years of experience, the last 24, 25 of which have been with the firm Parkin Architects, where he's a director of the firm, principal of the firm, and working on projects that are ginormous by anybody's measure, into the billion-dollar category. But I think we're in for a treat tonight because while he may touch on some of that, I think we might hear a little bit more about some smaller projects that get John's juices flowing just as much, and they're just as exciting as the healthcare work, which tends to be very detailed. You have to be a good listener. You have to be able to take some direction some of the time, but you do have to have influence on where projects are going, and John certainly has that. I think without further ado. And I might just thank everybody right now for coming on a long weekend, but you've got the keeners tonight.
Oh, thank you very much. Next time. Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for inviting me here. It's an honor, actually, and I don't get to do this very often. I'm a busy guy, and I'm usually talking to doctors and nurses, which is my passion. That's the reason I went into healthcare architecture. I do understand that Mr. Stavros presented some healthcare a couple of weeks ago, and since healthcare is all I've done for the last 35 years of my career, I'm going to depart from that. I do have other projects that do get me very excited, and I want to talk about those tonight. I did want to touch base, though, on the fact that I am working on and I'm leading the team for the new Oakville Hospital. This is a 1.6 million square foot hospital and just under $1 billion at $980,000. One of the largest single-build hospitals ever built in Canada. There are larger hospitals. Sunnybrook is larger, but that's been built over decades. This is ginormous. I think that's the word you used. It's intimidating. It is quite a project. Of course, to do these projects, I have to say that we surround ourselves with incredible talent. We've been very lucky to work in joint venture with Tom's firm. We've been very lucky to work with Adamson on this particular project. And we've just started another joint venture where we're doing the major addition to the Joseph Brand Hospital in Burlington. But I did want to talk, if I were going to talk about hospitals, and I'm not, but so far I have been, but that's another story. there's a tremendous amount going on in the healthcare field, and it's all being done by P3s. This means it's done with a private partnership. We bid on these projects, then we work in consortium to actually execute them and build them on time and on budget. They come with 4 really important ingredients. The first one is anxiety. When you are confronted with a project of this size and you have to have it to a point within 7 months to be able to bid it and win it, it's a high level of anxiety. When we do start meeting with the user groups after we win, we had only 5 months before LSA started pouring concrete. And that's very similar to what happened with the project here in London as well. They're stressful. There's a lot of fear. When you're making these decisions and you're making them quickly and you're moving forward at a very rapid pace, people are counting on you to make the right decisions, because with the speed, with the concrete, going backward is not an opportunity that we get. And so fear is a major part of it. Effort is what you put into it, and that means 80 hours a week. And that we are expected from everyone, our consultants, our mechanical, electrical, but most of all, we're blessed to have a wonderful, wonderful staff at Parkin Architects that supports me and stays up all night for me when necessary. I do reward them appropriately. And then the result. We will open this building and turn this over to the hospital on July 31st of this year. So we started construction in 2012. And just 3 and a bit years later, we are going to turn this over. The hospital will open at the end of the year, having spent time to the next 6 months to practice and learn how the spaces work and figure it out. One of the biggest challenges on a project like this, the color's not as good as I was hoping, but one of the challenges to a project like this is the people within the hospital are moving from 300,000 square foot hospital to a 1.6 million square foot hospital. And they have to understand that walking distances, due to the space-time continuum that we all share, are going to be longer. And so it's really interesting helping them not only to design the facility, but helping them to design the staffing for such a facility. But I'm not going to talk about hospitals tonight. I want to talk about life. I want to talk about the fact that there are other things besides this, and it is architecture. I want to talk about a project that my wife Marcia, who's here with me tonight, that we've been kind of engaged in for the last 9 years, I guess, or 10 years, when she returned to school. Marcia was a textile artist. This is work that she's done back in probably about 2000. And this is a Stephen Teeple church that we actually helped the congregation engage Stephen to do it. Despite the fact that I have my own firm and would love to do some things, I do understand that other people are better at certain things than I am. And we sought out Stephen Teeple, a wonderfully talented architect. And then Marcia, on events, had created certain textile pieces. And she was very clever and very wonderful, and she was in demand, even right to the General Synod for the Anglican Church of Canada, and she was doing much of their artwork and elements for them. This is again Stephen Teeple's church in Oakville, and Marcia created these Golgoth. This is actually very interesting because this was a creation for an Easter ceremony, and we're just going into Easter right now. So Marcia decided in 2002 that she really wanted to go back to school at Sheridan College. We're in Oakville, we live in Oakville, and she wanted to go back and she wanted to improve her textile skills, and we encouraged that. Now, while you're in Sheridan, you're taking a textile course. It's in the arts or the craft school of design, and they say that you have to actually take one of the other disciplines as well, just to be a little more rounded. So you could take woodworking, you could take ceramics, or you could take glass blowing. Of course, Marcia chose the cheapest one to have as a hobby or a career, and the result was that we ended up with a glassblower in our family, and an incredibly talented one at that. So this is Marcia at the time working at Sheridan College, starting to develop her skills, and wonderful to I spent a lot of time there photographing her, and actually ended up taking glassblowing classes myself so that I could assist. She worked very hard at it. And you can just see some of the technology that's necessary for this. Certainly textile and a sewing machine would have been a little less expensive, but this is what we were looking at in terms of where she was going, and it's been rewarding. I just wanted to show you some of the amazing work that she's done. Again, the color is not quite right on this particular projection, but these are wonderful pieces. These are cast glass. This is not a blown piece. So she does use ladles to actually take molten glass and pour them into molds that she creates, adding color and adding other elements to it that have to have coefficients of expansion. So there's an artist here, there's a scientist here, and I'm very proud of the work that she did and does. There's some other pieces that we have. These are in our private collection and are not to be released. And we'll show you what we're doing in order to kind of promote this. This is a piece that she did, which is blown glass, and it's a very tricky piece because there's two pieces that have to go together. And I was really quite amazed because she had to blow the one vessel and then keep it hot while she blew the other vessel into the other vessel, and using different colors. So it takes a bit of a team around her. Marcia's very much a team player, and to help her achieve these, I always loved this because I didn't know whether the one element was trying to get into the other one or the bigger element was trying to expel the other one. It's really quite an interesting kind of element. These are well displayed in our house, and with the proper lighting, these are amazing pieces of work. So she graduated, and we needed to figure out where she was going to be able to work. And there are other places that you can work, but we really felt that we wanted to invest in Marcia, and we wanted to invest in something that we could have and hold and do together as I get to my retirement years, which I'm working on Freedom 85, so that may not be too soon. But we did start a search to find a piece of property. We looked at many pieces of property, but one time we took a ride down to Niagara. I grew up in Niagara. Marcia's from Saskatchewan. And while we were in Niagara, we were driving along. I wanted to find something there. We were driving along the top of the Niagara Escarpment, and we fell down into what is called the Beamsville Bench. It's a very nice bowl that's about halfway up the escarpment between Grimsby and Beamsville, and extends through to Vineland. And it's quite a magical little plateau that has a very rich environment, kind of like a northern Burgundy, where Pinot Noirs and Chardonnays are grown and very nice. This barn happened to belong to Hidden Bench Wineries, and which is now our neighbor. So the property that you see in behind is a piece of property that we found and we purchased. And it sits on the side of the Niagara Escarpment, as I say. And so we've developed our relationship with this winery. What really brought us to this point was we were driving around, we saw the barn. I happened to say to Marcia, well, we'll never find anything here for sale because this is all wineries now. And there was a sign that said, for sale, please drive in for information. And we turned, and this was the access point to our property. We couldn't see the house, we couldn't see anything else. We just kind of took this as a bit of a leader. And as you came up on the other side, it opens up into this wonderful sunlit open area with a forest and escarpment on the one side, a stream that actually comes right out of the rock over here and then flows through that little valley of the main entrance. All of these trees are not necessarily indigenous, but were planted by the homeowners years ago, and now provide us with tremendous privacy from our neighbors and from the streets. It came also with a house. This house we couldn't even see when we first drove in. It's done by Fleming Secord of the Secord family in St. Catharines, from the Laura Secord, the United Empire Loyalist people. And the Secord, Fleming Secord was a very talented firm. They did some very nice buildings, some very beautiful buildings in St. Catharines, really focused on housing. And we were very pleased to find this and realize that this 1975 house that we were purchasing from the original owners of the property, it's spectacular. It was open
open plan. It was wonderful, and but it did come with some problems. It did come with mold. The ability to build in 1975, and the knowledge, rather, of building in 1975 with respect to how to vapor barrier and venting, and the attic, for example, was a mess with mold. We did get much of it abated, but always there was a little problem with this house, and we'll come back to that in just a little while. But it was a spectacular home, and we were very proud to have it. We used it for the first few years just as our weekend getaway, which is only a half an hour from our other house in Oakville. So I should caveat all of this. We know that we are very lucky. We know that we are living a life that is, I'm doing what I want to do in my career. I'm living with someone that I just adore, and we get to own things like this. So I do want you to realize that I'm humble in all of this, and I know how lucky we are. It came with a pool. Now, we didn't want a pool. We already had a pool, and we didn't really want one anymore because, well, their maintenance. And so this was a long way away from the house. The house was in the woods, and this was over by the vineyard. And we contemplated filling it in. We contemplated a number of things. But at the same time, it's a huge pool. First of all, this property isn't on a water source. It is on a cistern. You have to have trucks bring in water to work on this, or to survive. We're just out of the city limits, so we have septic field, and we're not on water. We do have gas, we do have hydro, we do have everything else. And so we thought this was going to be nothing but a problem. But as time went on, we started to fall in love with this, and we started to, as you'll see, refocus our attention to it as time went by. So the big journey was, how do we create a studio? How are we going to create something that's going to be special? This piece of property was special. We needed to create something else that was very special. So we worked very hard on it. We wanted something simple. The original house was simple. The original house was kind of a chocolate fondue, I think is the color from Benjamin Moore, that on the wood. When we first saw it, we went, ooh, it's a little dark. And then we realized, ooh, nobody can see this in the woods, and we have incredible privacy, and it grew on us in a very delicious way. So phase one, the studio. And so we created a very simple, a 33 by 33 foot square with appendages off of it, and we'll see that as it goes. A very simple LVL construction. The actual LVLs were quite inexpensive, relatively speaking. I know we're lucky. But it was a very simple kind of frame that we did, and it began to go up. It took on a very simple form. We really liked in the original house the corner windows that the Fleming Secord firm had created. We kind of took that same language and extended it up to 13-foot high windows and flooded the space with light. I mean, glass is a media that needs light. It really shows in light, and without light, it almost is non-existent. And so we wanted to make sure that Marcia had a wonderful space in which to create and which to work. And in fact, by the time we built this, the lighting system, which is here, and you will see pictures with it turned on, the lighting system is such that actually she doesn't really need to work until it gets dark with any lights on. She can work, it's like working outside. So there were certain elements that you could see where we started to break the form apart and bulge other elements out of it. And just to trace those openings that you see eventually got filled with glazing. And all of the services were hidden and concealed below the floor. The floor was in-floor heating so that Marcia could be nice and toasty while she worked, despite the fact that the furnace is on, which was making her even toastier. But the glazing and then a cedar ceiling on simple LVLs created a really nice environment in which to be creative. When the lights did come on in the evening, it became special. The lighting system is such that she can often work with just the up light on or the down lights on, and so it can switch just accordingly, and is relatively inexpensive for us to get a variety of lighting levels within the studio for her. One of the other elements is that we have outcrops. We are on the side of the Niagara Escarpment, so we do have outcroppings of Niagara limestone. And it's a great building, it's a great material, but it's too soft to build with. We really wanted to clad the exterior part of the building, but it's a very, well, you can actually see here, without much touching, if you just tap on it, it will fall apart. If you build on it, it will support tremendous weight, but it's too fragile. It breaks apart and it actually turns to almost dust. So we really couldn't use that on the project. So we did a long search and we found a cultured, or what do you call it? Okay, I'll call it fake stone from the United States. But it was a really nice stone, and it tended to, again, color's not quite right, but it tended to pick up the colors from the escarpment. It tended to pick up the kind of scale of the shale or of the limestone on the escarpment and all of those textures. And we started to have the project really start to come together in a nice, wonderful way. What was really wonderful about it was to sit in the house and leave just a few lights on in there at nighttime and just look back on it because the building kind of was like a beacon, and no one can really see it unless you're on our property and looking at it. It was really quite wonderful and magic. Then we started to say, wow, look at that reflection in the pool that we didn't want. And we said, maybe, just maybe, we should have another examination of the pool. We had put the studio adjacent to the pool. When Marcia got hot from working with the glass, she could really just jump into the pool. That was the plan. I don't think you've ever actually done that because I think the neighbors have discovered that she might do that and they're hanging around. But anyway, the reflections and things were just wonderful. Then we worked with people at Sheridan College, incredibly talented people in the craft and design component of the school. These are wonderful artists in their own right who then built us what they call the glory hole and various pieces that were brought in. They constructed these things. There's Marcia watching the final installation of some of the pieces going into the space. It was a wonderfully exciting time. And then we created what really was with hoods and fan units and shielding around those fan units. We created this, what we called the hot area. This was an electric furnace that melted the glass. It actually was so efficient that you could actually lean on it while the glass was incredibly hot. But if you stand in front of that door when it opens, and it opened on pneumatics, the radiant heat was just incredibly powerful. We couldn't put temperature smoke alarms or anything else. We had to do rate of rise detectors in the house, in the building, to make sure that it wasn't setting off the alarms every time she opened the door. So we had to kind of position them. It was kind of an interesting experience. One of the things, this slide's a little out of place, but one of the things that we really worked on was that privacy. You can't see this until you are onto our property by about 400 feet before you can see it. So we really kind of wanted to still maintain that, and we always do. Inside the studio became an incredible place for creation. Marcia, this was her cold work area where she actually polished the glass, etc. You saw the hot work area. And in this area, she works with the glass and starts to create and various things, and lots of industrial shelving spaces and her workbench. And it was great. When the lights were on, it was special. When the lights were off and during the daytime, it was magical. And at nighttime, it became really quite amazing. Just parts of it. We could use part of it for display. We could, at the entranceway, so she could actually market some of her work through that location. Other windows, these corner windows, looked up to the escarpment in different directions. All corners had these corner windows. Great for display. As I say, glass wants light. So then, of course, you give someone this kind of environment, and you kind of leave them alone, and you give them the tools, you give them the space, and they start to create. And so I just wanted to flip through, again, color is unfortunate, but these are really special pieces that we have, some in our collection, some of which have already been sold, of course, but wonderful pieces that of color. She has a great way with color, in her work, and a great way with texture and the melting of other forms together. Some of these are quite small. They're maybe a foot high by about 6 inches. Some of them are higher and are, when they're solid glass and 2 inches thick, it takes a tremendous amount of science just to anneal it, because it's hot and it can't be just cooled. It has to go into kilns, which work differently than ceramic kilns. They work the same way, but you start with them hot and then you bring them down to temperature as to start with them cold and bringing them up in ceramics. So we have computer boards that helped her determine how big the piece was and how to calculate how long. Some pieces, a blown piece might take 24 hours to anneal. A bigger piece could take 3 to 4 days to anneal. I should mention I'm very proud of her. Maybe you haven't. Some blown work as well as some cast work. So then phase 2 was, well, we fell in love with this pool that we didn't want. And so we started to say, well, we need to fix this. The house was livable, the house was doable. It needed work because we have a family and we do entertaining and we get a lot of guests and family guests as well. And we wanted to do that, but we were kind of saying, it's working, let's go work on the pool. So we started to develop the pool, and you can see we started to approach it and got rid of the concrete deck and started to put in some water features, and you can see how the studio started to come together into a bit of a relationship with this. Again, just the whole thing set up as that reflection of the studio back into the pool. It became very, very nice. It's a wonderful environment in which to sit. So these are the long windows, access points at every corner. These are the stone bits. These are here so that we don't see the fan units that sit on the roof for the hot blown area. Over bifold doors that allow us to access for materials into the studio. Everything was wonderful, and beautiful opportunity to not only display art again. We created these planter systems along the one side to give it just a different texture, so that the pool didn't just feel like it was orphaned in the place. We started to use architecture to define it, but in contrast to the Niagara Escarpment that was somewhat wild and untamed, and even wilder and more untamed, which I'll come to in a moment. But we then tried to cultivate this one little piece of the property, and it became a very nice. One of the things, these gates, these stagger, and these gates bifold open, and so we can, when we do have events, open the gates in between all of these elements so that everyone doesn't have to go through a 3-foot opening. They can actually walk through 12-foot openings to get onto the pool deck from the surrounding area. Morning in Niagara is spectacular during the summertime. We incorporated some of Marcia's work right into the fencing. It's very relaxing. It's very calm. It's very nice. Marcia's work, the relationship between these structured pieces, and still using the existing trees to shield us from too much. We built the top of the pool deck, and we created the opportunity for work to be displayed, just not on concrete, but also within the garden. So there's surprises as you work through the garden. We do have a lot of artist friends. This is Kevin Lochow, well-known Governor General winner of award for his artwork. And we find ways to display not just Marcia's work, but we do display the work that we have for our friends that we chum with and that we're also proud of. So you can see here that we've created this new relationship between us, the vineyard, and what you can't see in this picture is that Lake Ontario and the end of the Welland Canal is visible from our pool deck. Yes, I know we are very fortunate. And then the planters, Marcia spends tremendous time working on these, and we get these wonderful plants. And then we decided, okay, it's time to turn our attention to the house. We've got to do the house. We want to have this space. So we'd started phase 3. So you can see the pool. The vineyard is here. You can see the pool. You can see the new studio. You can see the existing house. And you can see here where we were planning on putting on an addition. You can also see the cigars that I no longer smoke, and you can see my scale and my sunglasses. So going back to the house, this picture was actually taken not the day, but very close to the day. And we were meeting with the contractor. We had our plans approved for that addition by the Niagara Escarpment Commission. Everything we do in any physical way on that property, we have to go to the Niagara Escarpment Commission, the Conservation Authority, and everyone else. We don't mind that. We actually think it's a good thing because it keeps all the other people from building condos next to us and office towers and abattoirs and things like that. And so we do play by the rules, and so we had all of our approvals, and at 4:30 on July 19th, 2013, and it's not that it's burnt into my brain, we met with our contractor to talk about starting the addition. And that was at 4:30. He left about 5:30. Then change happened that we were not anticipating. At 9:30 that night, well, Marcy and I'll just go back, we're sitting in this window. A tree came right through here. The tornado hit. It was so loud, we heard nothing. We did not hear anything except noise. We were looking out the window. Initially, we couldn't see the vineyard. Then we couldn't see the studio. Then we couldn't see our cars. And then it was just noise. We got up and ran down the stairs and up against the wall at the lowest level because the house was actually cut into the escarpment, which was part of the problem with mold. But nonetheless, we took shelter against the wall. But by the time we got there, it had passed. And we came upstairs, and now it was dark. It had just been dusky. And we could hear water roaring in. It was torrential rainfall that followed the tornado. And it was a tornado that came right down the side of the escarpment, an unusual thing. They tend to stay on the flat. Fortunately, as it came down the escarpment, it lifted. It then set down again when it got to the flat area of Beamsville and took out some trees there, but no one was hurt in this event. And we weren't either, but we were shaken. We were not stirred, but we were shaken. And actually, I'm going to be really honest. After an event like this, and you're going from something casual to something like this, I think you do go through a little bit of that PTSD because there was a couple months where we just felt uneasy after this event. But what happened when this happened, and you can see the size of the tree, we also lost 18 other immense trees on the property. So our 4.5 acres of Niagara Escarpment is just littered with trees. The root balls came completely out because the trees on the escarpment are trying to take root into the limestone. And so we had to make some serious decisions about this particular situation. Not only was the tree through the roof here and water pouring through, we didn't realize the tree was there until the lightning flashed and we saw a tree going past us as we were standing in the corridor. And but other branches impaled themselves like spears in the roof, so it was kind of a horrendous. And a house that had some mold with the next 4 days of heat had a lot of mold. All mold needs is a little bit of heat and some water and moisture, and it just took off. And the result was we had a house that we just couldn't salvage. We did get some financial compensation from the insurance company, but we realized we had to do a couple things. And one was either cut down all the trees, which we did not want to do, or we needed to move out of the woods. But you can see here some of the trees, the tops of those were just literally twisted off at the top, and 2 tons of wood were thrown 100 feet. We were lucky that there's a big maple. I don't have the picture of it. If it had come through, we would not be talking to you tonight. So what do we do? Well, we're inventive. The neighbors came over. We grabbed the stuff that we could, and we moved into the studio. It was summertime. It was hot. Marcia wasn't going to get to work in that kind of heat anyway. So we kind of moved in. We moved down 2 twin beds, and we kind of took on that Ozzie and Harriet kind of lifestyle, and kind of made ourselves at home. We rescued a television set, got some tables, rescued our computers. Over here, rescued our wine racks. I mean, the name's Christie, not stupid. And furniture, and we settled in. I mean, it was wonderful. It was traumatic, it was wonderful, wonderful at the same time. You can see we had lawn furniture, other furniture that we were able to carry from the house. Other stuff stayed in the house and we protected it. But suddenly, Marcia woke up on the Sunday morning. That was a Friday night, and we were waking up here on Sunday morning, and Marcia said, I think this would be a great place to have our kitchen, our living room, and our dining room. And I went, well, we just built this studio 5 years ago. And she said, well, you know, the lifting of the glass is getting heavier, everything else. What if we just did reinvent this? And we did not want to build in the forest again. And we did not want to take the trees down of the Niagara Escarpment, although we had the right to, because safety trumps anything else, but that's not what we bought the escarpment for. We said, let's move out and reconstitute ourselves. So this is our site. It's a large site, I have to say, 4.5 acres. There is a piece of property that bites into it here. Our road comes in along this side and up to the existing house, the studio, the pool, and we'll just zero in on that. And so we said, what if we don't build here, and what if we take this down, and what if we do build a little house, a house along this side of the studio? What if we connect it into the studio? What if we then build a large garage of about 1,000 square feet, which is about the size of Marcia's existing studio? What if we go from molten glass to kilns for slumping glass and doing things a little bit differently, take it down a notch, so that's what we did. You'll see this element, and why the building became that form was because we have to have a septic field. And the sophistication of the septic fields today are par none. We actually have a septic field that needs power. There's nothing, they don't do it by gravity anymore. They have lifters and agitators and bubblers and grinders, and if you're going to get approval for a septic field on the Niagara Escarpment and in the Niagara region, this is what you have to do. So that determined how much property we had, and this was the only flat piece we had. Everything else you can see along here is Niagara Escarpment, the edge of a slope. And so we didn't want to intrude into that, and we couldn't intrude into that with the septic field. So that was how the house became defined as 23 feet wide by 115 feet long. Yes, I know, that freaks me out too. 115 feet long. But what we did was the existing studio stopped right there. We created 2 connection points. We put a mechanical room in the middle, and we built an office for ourselves, a good-sized office for ourselves, master bedroom and bath and laundry on the main floor, as well as a significant garage that is not really a garage, it's a new studio. And we'll show you some pictures of that in a moment. We also bracketed part of this with 2 new stairs and a new entranceway at this location. And because of the length of the floor, especially at the second floor, we wanted to make sure we had 2 means of egress for the 3 bedrooms that we created here. We do have 3 sons, and we do want them to come home. And so we've created suites for them with washrooms and a bedroom for each. Yes, they are good size. And yes, we do know how lucky we are. We also, though, created out at the far end a deck. We really loved that veranda that was in the first house, and it had a spectacular view to the lake across, and so we wanted to recreate that, but in a little different way. It was a little narrow. It was much of a veranda. We wanted to create a deck. Oh, sorry. North is that way, top. So this is our southern exposure across through here. It always happens. So we just started construction last year, and then a goose laid her eggs. We were gone for 2 weeks. The goose came in, the contractor didn't notice, and suddenly we had a goose with eggs. Now the vineyard next door and all the vineyards said, oh, we can move them for you because we have to move them anyway. We won't hurt them. We just get the goose to move, and we'll pick up the eggs. We use our gloves. We move them all the time. They're in between the rows, and you know we have a business to run, and so we're allowed to do this. I said, well, can you do that so that we can get on with construction? So they came over one Saturday, and we came back on the Sunday, and the goose was still sitting on the eggs. And we said, what happened? And they said, we weren't going near that goose. That was the scariest goose we have ever entangled. So we let her stay there, hatch her eggs, and then had these adorable little geese. Not that we're all fans of geese, but I'll tell you, those are adorable, and we could not have destroyed them. What we did, though, to get them finally moving once they were all hatched is we opened a window right adjacent to them. Marcia put on Rex Murphy in one Sunday afternoon, and they all got up and left. And we never saw them again. Now, there were beautiful ponds around there, but they were attempting to use the pool cover as their training ground for swimming, and so we really did have to get them moving, and thank you, Rex. So the house that we started to build then kind of started to wrap around the back side of the studio, and you can start to see how it was starting to unfold. How am I doing for time? Oh, I'm really running long. So you can see the studio, and you can see how that upper deck with our office below is starting to take shape, and there's a railing going on now, a very nice glazed railing, and you'll see that we actually did top it with a cowl wall skylight, because it was a large deck and it was going to be dark if we hadn't. So we did a nice cowl wall skylight, which also forms a bit of a beacon for the building. It's the only piece now that you can see is this skylight that sticks above it. The winery next door, and well, the other wineries around the neighborhood, because there's about 5 that we can walk to, which is not good. But they want us to have different colors in the skylights depending on what we're serving. So they want pink if it's a rosé. They want us to have colors for Cabernet, and we're just not serving them all. But that's another story. So the view down to the pool, it became a whole new perspective. Now the pool is really starting to become magical for us, and then other views to the Niagara Escarpment, because this turns into a bowl. We're facing east with our property. The escarpment is actually to our west side, and we face east because the Niagara Escarpment takes a turn, leaves the Queenie. If you've ever driven down to Niagara-on-the-Lake, suddenly by Grimsby, the escarpment moves further away. And so we're on that kind of east looking, and it turns into a large bowl that forms this incredibly fertile and microclimate for vineyards. And then there's a walking trail that passes through the vineyard as part of the conservation area, and this is the view that they will have back to our place. Fortunately, not that many people use it. It's usually used once or twice a year for a weekend or two when they have an event down on the bench. So we also then created, on the back side, we created these translucent doors into the studio space, the new studio space. And it's coming together very well. Again, the color is just not right, but we've created this environment for Marcia to do the new work that she's going to be undertaking. And again, recycling windows from the original house, we were able to frame views to the adjacent spaces. We know that we're very lucky. We also have a son who is very clever. He just graduated from OCAD. We're very proud of him with following in his mother's footsteps. He He won the gold medal, and he's been doing very well with his illustrations. He does these strange illustrations. When you think of an illustrator, you think of people drawing and painting. What he does is three-dimensional objects and then photographs them and photoshops them, and it's time-consuming, but he has found himself in some demand just since graduation last year. And he's been doing a number of illustrations for the New York Times. He's been published in the New York Times 8 times in the last year, and we're very proud of him as well. Yes, we're very lucky. This is our office. We've built in some filing cabinets and views to the vineyard that we're really excited to get to. Again, the windows, we've tried to create them so that they frame almost like pictures, because we really don't need blinds except for sunlight. We don't have neighbors that can look into us unless they're really intruding, and we just don't seem to have that at all. One of the things, if you're going to live in the vineyard, is you have to design a wine rack. So this is part of our wine system that will display the wine from the neighborhood. And then certain other elements have been added. There's a pantry to go with the kitchen, and you can see that we've kind of continued to build. The interior of the studio has not changed in a significant way. The kitchens are now being finished. They should be finished, but they're not, and that's another story. But we're really hoping that we'll be moving into this at the end of April. The other commitment that we made to the Niagara Escarpment Commission was to restore the piece where the house had sat. Now, they're very pleased with us, because by doing that, it means the house should never have been allowed to be cut into the escarpment. In 1975, there were no rules. The Escarpment Commission wasn't in place. But now you would never be able to do that on the escarpment lands. And so we said, we're going to pull out of that specific location. Please give us a new approval for this other plan, and we will then commit to reforest the space where the house was. So we have started that process, and so it's a Carolinian forest in that area, and so we're planting nothing but indigenous plants back onto the escarpment. The pine trees that we do have on our property will not be cut down because we want them for their privacy, but the slope of the escarpment that was interrupted by the house will now be made whole again as it goes through our property, and they're pretty pleased with us, and we're pretty pleased with ourselves, actually. We have tremendous number of trillium growing on our property, and a wonderful stream that just pops out of the rock right there and forms across our property. So looking from the street, the house still hides itself, even though it was Tyvek's in this photo. All you can really see is the pyramid that sits on the top. And so this ends my show. It comes back to, and we can't wait to, now that the trucks are going to be gone, and the concrete trucks and the lumber trucks and the plumbers and everyone else, we hope to get this kind of approach to our property back again. So that's been my project. It's not a hospital, but it's been very healing to be involved in this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Maybe I could just get you to hang out. If there are some questions that people have, sort of a very interesting story, and one I wasn't expecting. So from that perspective, I think we all feel lucky.
Oh, thank you.
So the floor is open. John, if you want to come back and slot questions.
While I'm waiting for a question, I might say that this is not a side that this is my life side. There are I know a lot of people in the profession. Very few architects are aware, despite as much time as we've all spent together. People are aware that we're doing something, that Marcy and I have a project going on in Niagara, but no one has ever seen it. We've never really presented it to anyone except our very closest friends before. Are there any questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you find it very difficult moving from $1 billion project to designing something self-purposing?
Yes, because as an architect, and I know I'm very lucky. We normally don't get to do a house. Architects don't always get, we renovate houses for ourselves, but to create something that is actually of all of you is really quite a magical thing. Intimidating, I must say. This is the only wood frame building I have ever done in my life. Everything else I have always done in my career has been poured concrete, steel, glass, curtain wall, precast, brick. There's been a lot of education, and there's been some real learning curves on this to understand, you know, how does venting really work in these kind of environments? We don't want the mold problem to come to this place. One of the things you'll notice in this building, though, is there is no basement in our new house. We've gone away from that. The water table actually through this area, the water is not just coming out in that stream, it's coming everywhere, and it's flowing about 4 feet below the grade. And so we went no basement, we went slab on grade with heat, with hot water heating in the floor. But you're right, it's intimidating to actually do this, and at times I didn't think I was up to this. It took probably as long to conceive this as it did the Oakville Hospital. And of course I had a more demanding client as well. But the truth of the matter is, it is. You're dead right on. I have to say, it is intimidating, and it's still intimidating. We're excited about it, but almost now, when it's just about ready to move into, we're kind of, can we do this? Can we move into this place yet? We're trying to get the contractors out and everything else. It's harder to actually manage the contractor on this than managing LSA. The truth of the matter is, but good question.
John, I'll be on mine. So, you know, what's next on the horizon? So, are you going to suffer with postpartum?
You know, I really want to get there, and I want to enjoy this space. I want to enjoy the peninsula. I think the Niagara Peninsula is really quite magical. And we want to get our season tickets back to the Shaw and do those things and everything else. You know, I don't think as architects that we ever probably can retire, but because I think you need to work, and I don't really want to stop work. But Marcy and I thought about, well, maybe if we did this, once we get this one building behind us, this can't be that. This was at the beginning. We thought maybe what we should do is find other properties on the peninsula. The cost is significantly lower than the Oakville, Toronto area. It's significantly lower. And in fact, I'm going to be honest, we could never have achieved this if we had been in the GTA, if we had not gone down to the Niagara Escarpment and into these particular areas, which are just now being picked up by people that are retiring from Toronto. We probably would not have been able to achieve this house except by going down to the Niagara Escarpment. But we thought, well, maybe what we'll do is we'll maybe buy some other houses, and maybe we'll do the fixer-upper, do the flip and everything else. No way. No way. It is just too stressful. I don't know how people do houses, actually. Anything else? Well, thank you. Thank you.